Hello everyone, it's Annie, and I am here to do my March wrap-up. I read a lot of books this March. I participated in 2 readathons, Middle Grade March, which was so much fun, and the Irish Readathon, which again I loved. They were both really fun. I read some really great books for both of these, and I really want to share my thoughts with you. But because I read so many books, I don't want this video to be like an hour long, so I'm going to try and keep the explanations as short as possible. So without further ado, let's get started. The first book I read for Middle Grade March was Root Magic. This was one of my most anticipated reads of 2021, and oh my gosh, I gave it 5 stars. This book was absolutely magical. The atmosphere was so well done. I really felt like I was in the marshes of South Carolina, and just the summer heat, I felt like I was there, and I loved all of the characters so much. It follows 2 twins, Jay and Jezebel, who are part of this African-American family who practice what is called root magic, and it explores the prejudice that they suffer from white people, but also from other African-American people who don't approve of the root magic practice. And it explores the Gullah legends and spirits and just such a magical atmosphere, and I loved it so much. I think the way that the story was crafted was so well done. It has some really sad moments, really wholesome moments that makes it perfect for a middle grade read, and oh my gosh, I really want everyone to read this. This was such a magical book, definitely one of my favorites that I've read this year. And next I read Frostfire, which was a really good book. It was short, a very quick read. I think I read it in a couple hours, and it's a very adventurous fantasy story. What really stood out about this book for me was the setting and the world that this was set in. It's such a unique just culture and world that this author has built. So it is about this girl her culture is that they have to go up to this top of this mountain glacier thing and take a shard of the ice, and that is their companion, and it's magical, and the glacier is like their god. They worship it, this mountain, and I don't think I'm doing it justice. I think this book was really special, one of the most unique stories that I've read, and I know that if I read this as a kid, I would have been obsessed with it. I really loved it. The only thing was there's a bit like, I love the world setting-wise, but there's some conflict world-building-wise that just, I feel like, wasn't super explained really well. And I was just like, alright, well, there's conflict for the sake of having a conflict, and it's not really, given context. But again, it's not an adult fantasy, it is a middle grade fantasy, so I think that that's totally alright for what it is. And also, this cover is gorgeous. So I definitely recommend this if you want a really unique, fun, fast-paced, intense, adventurous middle grade read. The next book I read was The Brave by James Bird. This was the group book for Middle Grade March. I'm really sad to say that I disliked this book. It follows the main character, whose name I don't even remember. Yes, his name is Colin, and he has OCD, which actually I have struggled with in the past, and actually I did something very similar to what Colin does in the story. He counts every letter of the sentences that are said to him, and he has to say this letter out loud. I didn't do that. I actually would trace the letters in my mind, and I had to it looked like I was kind of playing piano. I hit it very well. I don't think many people are aware of it. But anyway, what I'm trying to get at is that I have personal experience with OCD, and that is most of the reason why I wanted to read this book, because I was really excited about it. But I'm not going to give any spoilers, but the way this was handled at the end of the book was just awful. I don't know if the author has OCD or any kind of mental illness or experience with it. I'm not sure. I don't want to judge him because of that, but I really did not like how his mental illness was handled at the end. And also, when he moves to this reservation to live with his birth mom because his OCD was too much for his white dad to handle, which is just horrible. Like, his dad was horrible. I don't know. Anyway, he meets this manic pixie dream girl, and she was just there to have Colin see, like, I don't know. She didn't do anything. She was a manic pixie dream girl, and it was just sad to see because I think she could have been a really cool and interesting character. She had disabled rep, and it was just, I wish that it could have been good. And also, Colin, I believe, is 12 or 13, and the romance between him and this manic pixie dream girl, it was written way older than these characters actually were, and it was not okay. It was kind of gross. So, those are my thoughts on The Brave. I am very sad that I didn't like this, but you can't like them all. The next book I also didn't like, and I'm so sad about it. It is Song for a Whale, and it is about this deaf girl who travels to Alaska to help this whale who sings at a different frequency than the other whales, and so he is not welcomed by them into their pods, and he's alone, and this main character feels very bad for the whale, and so she runs away. She literally takes her grandma from her assisted living facility, and they travel to Alaska without, like, telling her parents, and it's just so unrealistic. Also, the main character was a brat. I feel kind of insensitive saying that, but again, I think she was like 12, but she threw such temper tantrums and reacted to what, in my mind, are minor disappointments with such strong, like, crying and just screaming, and I don't know, it wasn't good. I really strongly disliked her, and I really wish I had liked this. It seemed like a really exciting story. The premise, again, was really good. I just think that the execution was quite lacking, unfortunately. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Song for a Whale. The next book I really liked. It is Tay Keller's When You Trap a Tiger. This is to do with a Korean family living in Washington State. They just recently moved to see their sick grandmother and live with her. And this book is really magical. It deals with a lot of Korean folklore, and it follows, oh, she's so cute. The main character is so cute and sweet. I really love her. The only reason I didn't give this 5 stars is because there's a character who is the main character's friend, and I see the role that he played to kind of move the main character's story forward and create a bit of conflict, but I felt myself while I was reading it just wishing that the parts with him were over. I just didn't like reading about him and his interactions with the main girl. I just thought they were not boring per se, but I found myself wishing they were over. But I loved the focus on the family. It focuses on the main character's relationship with her mother and her sister, her older sister, and of course her grandmother. And it was so good, and it deals with grief, and it is really, really good, and just everyone should read it. The next book was a 5-star read. It is The Blackbird Girls. I was astonished by this book, completely blown away. I absolutely loved it. One of, I think, probably my favorite read of this month, honestly. Even now, I read it towards the beginning of the month, and even now I'm still thinking about it. Oh, it was so good, and I know it will stick with me for a long time. It has two timelines, one in 1942 in Ukraine, and the other one is in 1986 during the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. And that is the main timeline. That follows two Ukrainian girls, one is Jewish, one is not, and they were enemies because of that difference. But following the Chernobyl disaster, they have to come together and travel together to live with the estranged grandmother of the Jewish main character. And she lives in Leningrad, St. Petersburg. And that is the timeline of 1942. It follows the grandmother's escape from the German troops taking over Ukraine during World War II and her escape to St. Petersburg, Russia. I loved it. There was so much going on. There's a lot of exploration of familial abuse, and it was really hard to read at times because of that. It was really upsetting, but I think it is such an important book to read. Of course, it also deals a lot with anti-Jewish sentiment, and I think that's also really important, especially for a middle grade. I just think that this book handled these really difficult topics extremely well and did it in such a captivating way. Again, I want to say that I love historical fiction middle grade. I've discovered that that is a favorite genre of mine, and I'm so glad that I got to read some for middle grade March. And now we have another 5-star historical fiction middle grade named Under the Broken Sky by Mariko Nagai. This is written in verse, which I didn't actually know until I started reading it. It follows a Japanese family who were living in Manchuria during World War II, and then the Soviet army invades Manchuria, and they have to escape to Harbin, China. And this is after their father is basically taken away from them and made to serve in the Japanese army, even though at that time in the war it was very obvious that Japan was going to lose. So they lose their father. They're forced to travel alone, this young girl and her even younger sister, and when they make it to Harbin, China, just the conditions are outrageously horrible and really, again, hard to read about. But this is such an important book, and I think the fact that it is written in verse makes it a little bit easier to read about such a horrible topic. And I think that the poems for each chapter were really beautiful, very well written, and I was really captivated by this story. So I really highly recommend this. Since it's written in verse, it's a very quick read as well, that definitely more people should pick up. And the last middle grade that I read this month was The Dragon Pearl by Yoon-Ha Lee. My first Yoon-Ha Lee book, yay! Now, I talked about this in depth in my Trans Day of Visibility video, which I'll link up there, but suffice it to say that I really, really liked this book. It is a sci-fi book that also incorporates Korean folklore, and the main character is a fox spirit, and she has to go and find her brother because he is said to have deserted the space military thing. And she knows that he would never do that. So she goes and infiltrates this space military and tries to find out and solve the mystery. And I loved the main character. I loved this book. It was just so well done. Of course, I love sci-fi too, so that makes it even better. Please read this. It was so, so good. And that is a good segue to talking about all the books by trans or non-binary authors that I read this month. Again, I talked about them all in depth in that Trans Day of Visibility video, so I won't be doing that here, but the ones that I read were Pet by Akweke Emezi, I'm Afraid of Men by Vivek Shraya, The Deep by Rivers Solomon, and Fierce Femmes and Notorious Liars by Kai Cheng Tom. I really highly enjoyed all of these books. I don't really have many complaints about them. I especially really loved Fierce Femmes and Notorious Liars, I have to say. I thought that was such an interesting, well-written, book that was so unique, and I really wish that more people would read. And I really also enjoyed Pet very much. I'd love to read more by Emezi, and I know that they wrote, I don't remember the title, but Vivek Oji. I have not read that. I know it's quite popular, and I'd love to read more by them in the future. Alright, so now I will talk about the books that I read for the Irish Readathon. First, I read Days Without End. Whoa! This was a 4.5. I rounded it up to 5 on Goodreads. I did not expect anything that happened in this book. The synopsis it's not incorrect, but it just does not prepare you for what the book actually is. My God, that was beautiful. It was a beautiful, beautiful book. Oh, Sebastian Barry's writing is beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. So this follows a Irish immigrant named Thomas McNulty, which is part of the reason why I read it. And it follows him in the American Southwest, I guess you could say. He kind of moves around. And first he fights in the Indian Wars, and then he fights in the Civil War. And it's a very sad book. It deals with a lot of death and violence because most of it is about war. But it's also about Tom and his beautiful relationship with his brother-in-arms. And I loved them so much. I did not expect their relationship to be so beautiful and heart-wrenching. I am just blown away by this book. I am so glad I read it for this. If you are looking for a really good historical fiction featuring LGBT characters, please pick this up. I know you will love it. The next book is Elsewhere by Rosita Bolland, and I love this book as well. I gave it 5 stars. It is a travel memoir about her traveling around the world through the years, and it was so beautiful. I really loved reading about her unique experiences in these different countries, the people she meets, and she also kind of talks about her life back in Ireland whenever she touches base there, and the different happenings that are going on. And this book was so beautiful, and I read it in one day. It was so interesting. It made me want to keep turning the pages, and it was made even more interesting to me because she talks about her trip to Antarctica, which I am planning to go to with my sister in 2022. So that was really exciting to read about. I am very happy to be going on that trip eventually, hopefully, with the pandemic and everything, it's over by then, hopefully. But this is a beautiful travel memoir. If you are interested in that genre at all, I highly recommend this. And the next one is Botanical Folktales of Britain and Ireland. This is a collection of short folktales, some are very short, collected from Britain and Ireland. And yeah, that's basically, what it says on the tin is what you get. It was interesting. I think the writing style was not really my style. I mean, it was written in a very folktale-ish way, of course, but it was really interesting to see, all these folktales to do with plants and their magical properties. So I really enjoyed reading it. And the last book that I read for the Irish Readathon is not actually written by an Irish author or based in Ireland at all, but it was for the prompt, a green cover. And it is The Forest of 1,000 Lanterns by Julie C. Dow. I loved this. I loved this book so much. I almost didn't read it because, let's be honest, the cover is kind of a generic YA fantasy cover. The synopsis on Goodreads does not do it justice at all. Again, it seems very generic. This book blew me away. It blew all my expectations out of the water. I loved it so much, and I'm so happy I decided to read it. It is following this ruthless, morally gray / villainous main character named Shifang, and my gosh, hearing all of her thoughts, it's just so cool. I love following her. She was such a unique main character. I loved the world that this story was set in. It's a fantasy inspired by East Asia, and it was so beautiful. So, so beautiful. The only reason I did not give this 5 stars, because it really deserves it, but the only reason is that there was kind of a love subplot or romance subplot that just didn't really do anything. It was boring, and again, like I said earlier, it was just, whenever those parts came up, I felt myself saying, okay, let's just move on, because I want the plot to move on, and I don't really care about this guy at all. So I thought he was kind of useless, but I really loved everything else about this book, and I really highly recommend this. It is so underrated, and really more people should be reading this. Oh wait, that wasn't the last book. The last book for Irish Readathon was the group book, which was The Henna Wars. I gave this book 2.5 stars. I did not like the main character. I just did not enjoy reading about her at all. And I didn't really feel like the romance was... It's not that it wasn't believable, it just didn't transmit a lot of feeling. Maybe that's my fault? I don't know. Basically, it's about these 2 girls, one who is Bengali and another who is Brazilian. And for their school, they have to do a business, like, entrepreneur project where they have to create their own businesses and actually, like, do it, which I think is a bit unrealistic and kind of annoyed me. But I don't know, maybe that's a thing in Ireland. I'm not sure. And, of course, the Bengali girl, she loves doing henna. She learned it from her grandmother and her mother, and she does this for her business. But then the Brazilian girl also does it, and she gets mad because it's cultural appropriation, and I don't know, it was just... Some of it was just drama for the sake of drama, which I really disliked. And I just felt like, especially after the halfway point, I was just wanting the book to be over. So, yeah, not for me, but I know a lot of people really enjoyed it. So, if you're looking for like a interesting multicultural lesbian romance that is YA, kind of on the younger side of YA, let's say, then yeah, maybe this is for you. Now for the 2 arcs that I read. First, I read Blackwater Sister by Zen Cho. This is about a girl named Jess whose parents lost their jobs in America and they moved back to their home country, Malaysia. But Jess actually was born in America, or she grew up from a very young age in America, so she doesn't really feel like she belongs in either country. So it explores that theme of immigration and being the child of immigrants. And it also explores a lot of Malaysian spiritual stuff and like legends and mythology, which is really interesting. I gave this book 3 stars, or 3.5. I really liked the unique story, but I think the book was very dialogue heavy, and I would have loved more atmospheric writing a little bit. And yeah, those are my thoughts on that. But I know this is on a lot of people's most anticipated lists, and definitely I recommend you give it a read. And then I read The Ones We're Meant to Find. I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. I will be uploading a review of this book closer to its release date. Oh my gosh, I love this so much. It was such a good YA sci-fi. It follows 2 sisters. One is named C, who wakes up on an island and doesn't know how she got there, and she's all alone, and all she knows is she has to find her sister. And then her sister, who lives on this eco-city, this floating eco-city, because the rest of the actual Earth is like decimated by pollution and natural disasters because of humanity's interference with nature. My God, this was such an amazing book. The world building was top-notch. The characters, so unique and interesting to read about. All of their relationships just meshed together beautifully. The story just kept me really invested. Oh, please read it. And don't forget to watch my review when I upload it. Okay, so now we're getting into some random books that I read, and the first one is Eat the Buddha by Barbara Demick, and I really, really liked reading this book. It is all about the situation in Tibet right now with China. I learned so much about this. I've seen some people give it bad ratings. I think those people might know more about Tibet than I did when I first read this, because I really didn't know much except the basic fact that Tibet and China are complicated and Tibet wants to be free and China does not want them to be free. And that is all I knew. I did not know any of the history about it, and it was so educational. And I also read Nothing to Envy by the same author about North Korea. And I think Barbara Demick is a very, very interesting author to read. She writes really well about these countries that are kind of difficult for lay people to get information on. So I highly recommend this if you want to read and learn more about Tibet. Then I read Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro, and I don't know what I expected. This is my first Ishiguro, and it was nice. I thought the premise was interesting. I really liked Clara. I thought she was adorable. The premise is that these kids in the future have artificial friends, which are basically robots, like Clara, and she is bought by this family to help take care of this little girl who is sick. And I don't know if I just read it wrong. There was just something weirdly off about it that just didn't grab me. It didn't take me into the story. I really liked Clara, but I didn't really connect with any of the other characters. And at the end, I just feel like nothing really happened, which is maybe the point of it. I have no idea. I don't know, maybe someone else who's more familiar with his works would like this better or be able to explain it better to me. So if that's you, I'd really appreciate a comment about it, because I think I need a little bit of help understanding this one. But as it is, I liked it fine. I gave it 3 stars. It's a good sci-fi novel. And then I read Sense and Sensibility for the Down Memory Jane read-along, and I did not like this. Jane Austen, why? Oh my god. It was just... It followed 2 sisters, which I thought was interesting, but the main girl was just, like, too perfect. It was like if Jane was the main character of Pride and Prejudice instead of Elizabeth. I didn't really connect with the characters, and I thought the love interests were all horrible. They were all horrible people, and I know Jane Austen is, like, supposed to be satirical, but I just didn't enjoy reading this as much as I have her other works, so hopefully I enjoy the next Jane Austen I read much more. And then I read Spinning by Tilly Walden, which is a graphic memoir about this woman's life ice skating from a young age. And I read this for a secret TBR vlog. I won't tell you what it is. I don't know when it's coming out because I've been reading books for it for a few months now. But this book was beautiful. I gave it 5 stars. I was so moved by Tilly's story. I really want everyone to read this. Even if you're not interested in ice skating at all, that is a big part of it, but it's more about coming of age and coming out as well, and dealing with bullying and other really hard things like sexual assault and things like that, and moving a lot, and it was really, really good. It was so beautiful, and I highly recommend this. Okay, we are almost done. Next is Speak Okinawa, which is another memoir. I also gave this 5 stars. I mean, oh my gosh, this is a new release. It is so worth it. This memoir talks about really, really difficult topics in a way that the author does not shy away from anything. She tells it like it is. She deals with really hard emotions in a way that I felt like was really easily understandable and easy for me to absorb and apply to my own life. It's about her. She had grown up with an Okinawan mother who married an American soldier, and they live in America, and it deals with her kind of feeling in between these two cultures, her relationship with her father, her relationship with her mother, and how those relationships have changed during the years, and her relationships with other people. It is so good. And there are also chapters interspersed that deal with the history of Okinawa itself, and it's so great, so great. Oh, I really want other people to read this. If you are at all interested in Okinawa or interested in memoirs like this that are so well written and moving, highly recommend this book. It is so, so good. And then we have Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. This had been pretty high on my TBR. I was very excited about this book. It's supposed to be a great sci-fi book, but kind of fell short for me. I think maybe my expectations were too high. It's about how a pandemic has ravaged the world, and it is this traveling symphony / Shakespearean actor guild traveling around to these different towns, and I don't know, I was kind of bored during some of it. And also there were a lot of characters. I got a bit confused with that, to be honest. I think some parts of it were really, really captivating and interesting, especially the parts with the airport, but I really didn't care about, like, the flashback parts from before the pandemic. It just dealt with this actor having so many ex-wives, and like, oh, he didn't want to be this famous. He thought he did, but he doesn't want to because it's a hard life. It's like, oh, boo-hoo. I really don't care. And I guess I don't like reading about actors and actresses, so maybe I didn't know that this book was about that, though. I feel a little bit misled, I gotta say. But I think her writing is very good, and maybe I'd like some of her other books instead. The next book is Hidden Valley Road, and it deals with this family in the 1960s-ish. That's mainly where it's focused, and they have 12 children, and 6 of the children, all boys, have schizophrenia. And that is basically the focus of the book. It focuses on when each boy had their psychotic break, and how the non-sick children deal with this and their feelings toward it. And I think it was very interesting. I really knew nothing about this, and apparently this family had a lot to do with our research and understanding of schizophrenia in modern times. So that was very interesting to learn. I gave this 4 stars. I just think it could have been shorter. I don't know. I don't know. There were parts that I felt myself like kind of drifting off, whereas I am really, really interested in the topic, so I know it wasn't the topic that's the problem. I think it was the writing kind of getting a little bit meandering at some points. But I really, really enjoyed reading about this. It was very informational and educational, and if you're interested in all about reading about mental health, definitely pick this one up. And the last book I read for the Buzzwordathon for the word time, which is A Stitch in Time by Andrew Robinson. This book is a Deep Space Nine tie-in novel. If any of you are Star Trek fans, let me know in the comments down below. Deep Space Nine is my favorite Star Trek series. It's just so good. And Garak, of course, is my favorite character. He is the Cardassian tailor who lives on Deep Space Nine, and Andrew Robinson was the actor who played him. So he basically wrote the memoir of Garak, and it was really, really well done. It gives a lot of background to the Cardassian history. For those who don't know, the Cardassians are an alien race who take over this planet called Bajor, and they're kind of the villains, at least some parts of Deep Space Nine. It's complicated, but I love Garak. He is such an interesting character, and he's kind of a spy, kind of in between all of these cultures. And the one complaint that I have is that there was this really unnecessary romance, but what can you do? In terms of Star Trek tie-in novels, this is one of the best because usually they're awful. So I'm really glad that I finally got around to reading this. I've been meaning to read it forever, so I'm glad that I got to read it for Buzzwordathon. Alright everyone, thank you so much for watching my long March wrap-up. I really loved so many of the books that I read this month. There were so many great 5-star reads that I really hope you'll want to check out as well. Please let me know what your favorite book you read this month was. I'd love to get some more recommendations, and let me know any of your thoughts about the books that I read. So if you liked this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more bookish videos every Wednesday and Saturday. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you! See you next time!